You're watching a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall Special, Rights versus Rules, Gun Control in Illinois.
A fiery debate.
We're going to make felons out of taxpayers.
The hypocrisy in this legislation is that this bill does not ban weapons of war, but rather keeps them legal to own.
As Illinois' efforts to curb gun violence led to controversy at the State House.
While they throw their hands up, resigning themselves to the idea that gun violence is a sacrifice that Americans must accept. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Over a year since the Protect Illinois Community Act was signed, it still draws in heated debate today. Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dawn Sterling.
And I'm Stacey Skrizak. Tonight, we are focusing on a law that's been at the center of many controversies and lawsuits since it went into effect last year.
Yeah, the Protect Illinois Community Act bans certain assault-style weapons in Illinois. The law bans certain types of weapons and weapon accessories, as well as requires those who already own them prior to January 10th, 2023, to register those weapons with Illinois State Police.
We have experts who are involved with the impact of the law joining us tonight to discuss what the law means and how it came about. And we want to introduce you to our guests joining us tonight. We have Sangamon County Sheriff Jack Campbell, Macon County Sheriff Jim Root, as well as Christian County State's Attorney John McWard, and we have State Representative Dan Calkins. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you. We really appreciate you coming out, because we did reach out to Democratic lawmakers, states attorneys, and sheriffs multiple times who all declined to attend today, as well as reaching out to ISP to join, but they declined due to ongoing lawsuits.
Now, the Protect Illinois Community Act, it was signed into law only hours after it passed both chambers on January 10th, 2023. One signed it in, made its way in Illinois, the 9th state to ban assault weapons. Sponsors of the bill say that the push to pass the ban was galvanized by both the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and the Highland Park shooting here in Illinois.
This legislation was decades in the making of efforts of Democrats and Republicans trying to ban the sale of assault weapons in Illinois. We finally did that in January of 2023. We banned the sale of assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, rapid-fire devices, but we also expanded our coverage of firearm restraining orders and went after gun traffickers that are crossing state lines.
Though the law went into effect immediately, it was not without its challenges. There were numerous legal challenges that we'll explain shortly, and low registration numbers with the Illinois State Police in comparison to the number of FOID card carriers in the state.
And here's a look at the most current registration numbers from Illinois State Police. 6,945 individuals have completed a disclosure form. There have been 20,648 firearms, 7,726 accessory disclosures, and 114 ammunition disclosures. There has been a total of 20,648 disclosures. This was from the period from January 1st to March 29th. And here's a look at those numbers prior to the January 1st deadline. 29,357 individuals filed a disclosure, and 112,350 disclosures were filed in that 3-month period, with 68,000 firearms, 42,000 accessories, and 528 ammunition disclosures filed. The total number of active FOID cards in the state of Illinois is over 2.1 million.
Governor Pritzker signed the Protect Illinois Community Act back in January of 2023, and ever since, lawmakers, gun organizations, and attorneys have filed dozens of lawsuits saying that it violated their rights.
Our Carolina Hassett breaks down the legal challenges that came after the governor signed the act.
Dozens of lawsuits at the state and federal level were filed after the Protect Illinois Communities Act was signed last year. One of the lawsuits came from Representative Dan Calkins, who claimed the law violates the 14th Amendment.
When this law was passed, it took away my rights, but yet granted those rights to a certain class of people. Prison guards, police officers, state police, and there was no way for me to ever get my rights back unless I wanted to become a police officer.
Other lawsuits from gun rights groups and advocates were also filed, with several being taken on by attorney Tom DeVore. DeVore also asked the courts for a temporary restraining order against the act, which was granted by an Effingham County judge.
A restraining order essentially says we're freezing the law.
While judges in Macon County initially ruled in Calkin's favor, the case still went to the Illinois Supreme Court, which ruled the law was constitutional back in August of 2023.
We don't feel we got a fair hearing at the Illinois Supreme Court. There are two justices on the Supreme Court that we felt are compromised. We felt that they had bias. They were biased against us.
This leaves the question of what happened to all the other remaining lawsuits.
The state would petition for them to be dismissed if they hadn't been withdrawn, unless you've got a unique argument.
Hearings are still being scheduled for the federal lawsuits, but Calkins is sure the federal courts will rule the law unconstitutional.
Thanks, Carolina. Redfield says usually the federal government leaves bigger agenda items like this one for discussion later on in the year.
And speaking of discussion, we've got our sheriffs here, Sheriff Jim Root as well as Jack Campbell. And watching this and seeing, the law take effect, what were your initial reactions to the assault weapons ban?
Normally, our role is just to enforce the laws that the legislature passes. This is my first time in 32 years of law enforcement that I saw a law that was passed that was, in my opinion, so egregiously a violation of our constitutional rights that we simply had to take a position on this as sheriffs here in Illinois. And 95 out of 102 sheriffs took the same position that this was unconstitutional in our opinion, and they were not going to be going around knocking on people's doors to see if they registered their weapons.
Yeah, and you took the same stance, right?
I took the same stance, and the thing about it is there's so much in this law that it's really hard to understand when you first look at it, and unless you actually dive into it, you don't really see how much moving parts there are with enforcement.
Why was it so different?
Well, again, the first oath of office we took was to enforce people's constitutional rights, and this is a philosophical issue for us as sheriffs. That we are elected, we're the only law enforcement officials elected, right. And so we felt that special relationship to our citizens that we had to defend their constitutional rights. And you took on day one, you took people that own these weapons and made them a felon if they didn't register them. So this is the only law that I've seen like that, where normally laws protect us and they make us safer and they make our lives better. In this case, you were taking away people's rights to defend themselves, the right to hunt with whatever weapon they want. And it's a slippery slope when you start to take away even certain types of weapons, even if it looks like on the surface people don't really need to own these.
Yeah. Okay, and go ahead.
So the purpose of the legislation is to take guns away from criminals. What you're doing is you're making law-abiding citizens criminals, which is a problem for us because we have plenty of people in jail that need to be in jail. We don't need to fill it up with people that are, decent people.
That's the next question. So when it comes to resources for you guys, this has got to, if you were to go out and start knocking on doors, that's a lot of resources.
We don't, our job is public safety for the immediate action of a criminal. And we do not have those type of resources. We're all hurting for manpower the way it is now, and we simply don't have the ability to do this. And another reason why it's frustrating on our end too, if I can add, is that criminals don't follow laws by nature. So you can make 100 more gun laws, and it's just going to be more for them to break, and then you're hurting law-abiding citizens.
Yeah. So would you say this is more of a burden for sheriff's departments?
It is, because what we do is our day-to-day operations. We're responding to calls of people that actually need our assistance, and we don't have the time to proactively go out. And one, we don't have the ability to go out and know who has these weapons. The only time that we're going to actually come in contact with people that have these is if they're a victim of a crime and their weapon has been stolen in a burglary. That's when we are actually going to have to look at the ramifications of whether or not they registered or not.
And like you said, if you feel it's a law-abiding citizen, why would you go take their weapon?
We don't want to do that.
Right.
We don't want, one is it, and to correct what Sheriff Campbell said, it is a misdemeanor offense for the first time. It is a non-detainable offense, which means we couldn't take them to jail if we wanted to.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
No, again, this is just a philosophical issue for us that we want people to have these weapons. It's their constitutional right. And the Constitution was designed to protect us against government, and it's a very important issue for us.
Okay. All right. Well, coming up, all of our guests will be joining us in on this discussion, and we're going to have lots more to talk about coming up. We'll be right back.
You're watching a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall Special, Rights versus Rules, Gun Control in Illinois.
And welcome back. We are continuing our town hall discussion on the Protect Illinois Community Act. Prior to the break, we heard from the sheriffs, both sheriffs here, but we wanted to get the opinion from from State's Attorney McWard as well as Representative Calkins. You watched them, you saw their first reactions. Let's start with you. What was your first reactions?
The interesting thing is I cannot prosecute a case without a report. And so as Sheriff Root said, it's at the back or afterthought for a lot of officers in Christian County or all over. They're probably not going to write a report, someone not registering their weapon. I can't do anything until somebody does that. I think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Christian County Sheriff's Department, we haven't seen any of these reports. And I think it's primarily because it's encouragement to follow the law. It is, instead of writing a report, hey, get in compliance. But at this point in time, I don't have any reports to prosecute. So I think that's pretty consistent across Illinois. I've talked to other state's attorneys. I've asked them if they've received a report. They haven't. I did hear a couple instances about the door knocking, the door checking. The problem with that is you have to have probable cause. And without somebody or the government knowing that you have those weapons, you have no basis to go inside the home. And so I don't think it'd be very fruitful for any officer to show up at a house or go door to door trying to find these weapons. But I don't know what the state police's intentions are. And if anybody wants to,
that makes sense.
Chime into that.
Yeah, what about you? With the reaction to what they were saying earlier?
This is exactly the debate that we had on the House floor in the short amount of time that we saw the bill, running it through in the dead of night. We didn't get the 3 readings that this Constitution requires, 3 readings on 3 separate days. But I think as a result of this law being passed and the Illinois Supreme Court ruling, in their ruling, 3 of the judges talked about, or 2 of them did, talked about that this law isn't even valid because it didn't get the required 3 separate days. So this law was never constitutionally passed in Illinois. However, the Illinois Supreme Court, as you saw in that piece, we believe is compromised. 2 of the judges that got elected were heavily financed by plaintiffs in this case, and they were endorsed and accepted the endorsement of anti-gun activists in those districts, and essentially said that when they ever got this case, that they were going to rule it constitutional. So, we didn't really get a fair trial, but I think the bell was rung on the 3 rulings. I think any person with common sense would know that this is an unconstitutional law, and we're all of us took that oath to defend the Constitution, and that's what we're going to do.
Now, something that surprised all of us here at the station was the fact that this is an ISP database. Not one person at this table has access to that database. You don't even know who has registered and who hasn't. So those, thousands of numbers that I read off, they could be in your county, maybe not in your county. You have no idea.
One of the interesting things to think about, though, is every time that somebody buys a legal weapon from Shields or from a firearms dealer, that serial number is registered with a federal database, and so that information is accessible by FBI, ATF, those types of organizations. And I think that's some of the hesitation for a lot of people. Why are we having to register a weapon that I legally bought earlier in time to then give the government, that being state of Illinois, more information about myself? If they have a concern about me maybe struggling with mental health and want to revoke my FOID card status, they would have to serve a subpoena or have probable cause to get that information to then revoke my status. And especially when I talk to constituents in Christian County, the focus is I don't want the intrusive reach of the government. We don't want that. We go to work, we pay taxes, we go about our daily lives. We don't commit crimes. Why should we have to tell the government every single thing about ourselves? And that's what I hear on a daily basis. So. So
how do they expect you to enforce it either way if you don't have access to a registry to even check if you were to hypothetically pull someone over?
So what they're expecting us to do is in the event that we would encounter somebody with one of these weapons, there is when we run them through to a system, it'll come back with an endorsement, and then what they're talking about is an endorsement that says that they have registered. We don't know what they registered. We don't know if that's the gun that they registered. We don't know any of that. All we know is that they filed an affidavit that says they claimed to own one of these prohibited, or one that goes into this ban. That's the only way that we would know. Other than that, we would never know that these people would possess them.
And I think we saw the numbers earlier that we reported on how many actually registered. We've reported in the past that it wasn't a big campaign that they were trying to get out. They were more relying on the media to get word out that you did need to register. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a better way to go about that?
Oh, I'm sure there is, but again, it shows the controversial nature of this act. They knew people, I think, were not going to be willing to even buy into a campaign. Again, it's so controversial that you're taking away somebody's constitutional rights that I don't think you could have paid people to go register. In fact, I have many gun owners, I've been a gun owner my entire life, have told me there is no way I'm going to register one of my weapons. And they said, I know you're the sheriff, you're my friend, but I'm not registering a weapon. And I said, don't say anything else to me.
Yeah, please stop talking. Thoughts?
Well, it's good, though. Well, I want to correct one thing that Representative Morgan said in his piece. No Republican has ever put forth a bill or signed on to a bill that restricts people's constitutional rights. So he's totally wrong on that account. And number two, he is a lawyer. And he is also not only sworn an oath to the Constitution as a representative, but he's also a lawyer in the courts. And he knows what the Constitution is. Now, yes, there was a tragic massacre on the 4th of July in his hometown. I get that. But that person, and now I believe his family, are being held to account for that. And now, because of that, and I think the pressures of our current governor, we're sitting here faced with a situation that we have potentially made millions, couple of million, at least a million people could potentially be felons that have gone out of their way to get a FOID card, and in some cases a concealed carry endorsement, have followed the law. We don't like the law. We think the FOID card's unconstitutional as well, but it's the law, and we've done it. And now to put us in this position of having to choose between the constitutionality and the protections that are guaranteed to us and the political whims of the Democrat Party in Illinois is unfair, and I think will eventually be found unconstitutional. But it's unfortunate that we're spending millions of dollars on lawsuits and lawyers. I mean, I can tell you what I spent on our lawsuit, but think about all the other lawsuits that are going on up in Plainfield, in northern Illinois, and in the Southern District, and now to the U.S. Supreme Court again. We're fighting ourselves because the taxpayers are paying the government's lawyer bills, and we're also having to pay our own attorneys.
And I want to add something to what State's Attorney McWard said. There is some unintended consequences of doing an enforcement before it gets to the court system, because in the event that you do something, make an arrest, write a search warrant based off of this statute, and it goes to the court system, it could be found unconstitutional, and that whole case gets thrown out.
Right, and it could be one that...
It could be one, right. It could be a homicide, or it could be something that is so hinged upon that law that could have an unintended consequence that could totally destroy an actual criminal case that we would have been able to work on.
All right, a great conversation. We're going to keep it going, coming up right after the break.
You're watching a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall Special, Rights versus Rules, Gun Control in Illinois.
Welcome back. We continue our town hall discussion on the Protect Illinois Community Act.
We've had some great discussion for the past several minutes. We want to go back to the implementation, though, of the law for a moment with how Illinois residents were notified and what rules ISP are operating under. Now, people who fail to register their assault weapons can face charges. Some are concerned, though, that the state didn't notify citizens of the changed law or the penalties well enough.
Christian County Chief Deputy Sheriff Jim Baker says the state should send a notice to each FOID card owner. This would be similar to jury duty or tax notices.
We get questions all the time. People come to the front door, or you get stopped out in the public wanting to know exactly what qualifies it, what they don't. I mean, you get people that have heard about the requirements, but then at the end of the day, they don't know what the requirements are.
And when the law changed, Illinois State Police notified people through news releases, social media posts, and a pop-up on their website.
With more controversy over the act, some state lawmakers had to step in to figure out how the law was going to be enforced. Our Julia Rozier is working for you on what those lawmakers decided and what the updates are.
The Illinois State Police first laid out their proposed revised rules to state lawmakers on the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules, or JCAR for short, last year. JCAR is a bipartisan group that has oversight authority of state agency rulemaking. Since then, there have been multiple JCAR meetings where the state police's proposed rules were discussed. Those revisions included updating definitions, such as who is exempt from registering and non-residents who travel through Illinois to use their guns legally in another state. In September 2023, ISP filed emergency rules for the act. At the hearing in December 2023, JCAR declined to take action on the proposed set of rules, saying it will consider them at their next meeting about 1 month later. And at that January hearing, JCAR filed an objection that passed. However, the objection did not prevent the adoption of ISP's permanent rule. The permanent rules took effect on February 8th, prior to the expiration of the emergency rules.
And to see the full list of the rules, just head over to our website, News Channel 20. We did reach out to Illinois State Police to be part of this program, but due to pending lawsuits, they declined. And we do want to mention that we reached out to Democratic lawmakers, sheriffs, and state's attorneys for this town hall. They all declined to join or had prior engagements.
So you guys are the ones responding, the law enforcement and state's attorneys and representatives responding to gun crimes. And we know nationwide that it's a problem and nobody wants to see mass shootings. So what would solve the problem if this law isn't it?
What would solve the problem is if you enforce the laws that are already on the books. We are not holding criminals accountable. Look at the Safety Act, no cash bail. We're not keeping people in jail that should be in jail. And I want to add also that this law will have zero impact on the murder rate in the state of Illinois. You look at Cook County, the Chicago area, they have some of the toughest gun laws in the country, and every weekend we have shootings over and over and over again. Enforce the laws that are already on the books.
And John McWhorter, I see you nodding your head. So what do you want to add to?
There are no laws or regulations that are going to change the current gun death rates in the state of Illinois. For Christian County, I think we have more gun ownership per capita than most other counties. We don't have the violent crimes. We don't have gun crimes. I think to date we're approximately 4 months into our calendar year. I've only charged 2 gun cases. But with that, we have lawful gun owners who know how to use a weapon, who know how to defend themselves, and know how to defend their families. No laws that are going to be passed will prevent illegal gun possessors from committing crimes. I mean, what we have to do is strengthen penalties for commissions of crimes that involve weapons. In addition to that, we need to work with the federal government to enhance the ability to take a state case to the federal government for more serious prosecution. I would defer to anyone with respect to
well, that's exactly the problem. And there's been multiple gun cases, where we have criminals using a weapon, carjacking, murders, shootouts. We honored a fallen police officers today at the memorial. And these gun cases aren't being tried. We had this illegal alien arrested 3 years ago for waving a gun around in Chicago. And they took him to federal court. The state of Illinois didn't prosecute this illegal alien for not having a FOID card, and that would have been a crime and possibly had been deported. But no, this went to a federal court who went all the way up to some federal judge in Chicago who said that this guy has his Second Amendment rights and he can have a gun. No FOID card. Didn't say he did, just said, no, this guy's got Second Amendment rights. This is the problem we have. We're not going after the criminals. We're not attacking crime the way we should be, and to your point. But trying to get something done in Springfield is worthless in this scenario. There is no will on the part of the governor or the Democrats that control the General Assembly to enhance penalties, to stiffen the penalties for using a weapon in the commission of a crime. But I agree with you guys. That's what we need to do. We need to be serious about it. We need to crack down on it. And these folks need to know that if they pull out a gun, they shoot a police officer, they're going away for life. If they use a gun in the commission of a crime, it's an enhanced penalty that will automatically be prosecuted. No discretion. I'm sorry. You take a case to a state's attorney and this been arrested for using a gun in a carjacking or a robbery or a home invasion, it's there. I mean, prove it and send them off to prison.
So stronger mandatory minimums. And it shouldn't hinge upon the whole case. It just should hinge upon the mandatory minimum enhancement of just merely a felon in possession of a weapon, period. 10, 15 years, you're done.
Now, briefly, because we are running out of time, we've talked a lot about what you feel is wrong with this ban. Is there anything, any part of PICA that you actually agree with?
I do.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the best parts about our government, we have checks and balances, right? And with that, the one thing I do like is the mental health aspect. If there's a question about somebody's mental health, it is checked, right? It doesn't go unnoticed. And I think that is parallel to our FOID card. You know, you have to apply for a FOID card. You're approved. You go through all the background checks. Everything's good. I think mental health can change in a matter of a moment, matter of a month, and to continue to make sure that lawful gun owners are in a great mental mindset. I think that's one way we could prevent crimes, and I think that is a good aspect of it. But I don't know if sheriffs have a thought or feeling on that.
You know, again, any law that you can look at the safety component and make our life safer, again, the mental health aspect of this law, yes. But the problem is, you know, the gun issue, the Second Amendment right issue, for me, it shadows the entire rest of the law. So I'm very reluctant to say I like much of it.
Right, yeah. And Representative Calkins, you said that there were aspects that you did.
Yeah, I like the law. I think it's so bad and so convoluted and so despicable that it's going to be overturned. And it was written in such a way, and it infringes on the rights so obviously that there's no question. And the Illinois and the United States Supreme Court, where it eventually will end up, is going to declare this law unconstitutional. Okay. I think it's that bad.
Okay, Sheriff Roop.
I would agree. It can't stand on its own, especially with the recent rulings in the federal system. It's going to be hard to make that jump to be a constitutional. So they're going to have to scrap it and then come back and replace some of the good aspects. And the mental health part of it is definitely one that has benefit. But we also see some problems with people not wanting to turn their loved ones in and
or getting the gun for them.
Those types of things, and so there's some issues with it that still have some hurdles.
All right, we're going to have final thoughts when we come back.
Watching a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall Special, Rights versus Rules, Gun Control in Illinois.
And welcome back. We've spoke about the legal implications about the law and how it's being enforced in certain counties across the state.
But what about the other impacts of PICA? Gun advocates and hobbyists that use guns such as airsoft and paintball guns also concerned about parts of their gear needing to have an affidavit submitted. The concern originally came as some accessories for paintball and airsoft guns that can be used on firearms as well.
And under PICA, certain firearm attachments must be registered as well, as we've discussed. And the statement that we did receive from ISP back in December says the attachment must be specifically designed for firearms or used on a firearm.
Although, according to ISP's website, you do not have to be 21 to submit an affidavit of a firearm. But in Illinois, you do have to be 21 to apply for a FOID card. This leads to our next topic.
Yes, and there's been a lot of confusion, I guess you could say, with let's bring back our guest, and some confusions with a lot of people what may have a paintball gun or pellet guns, and what what do you have to say to them, and should they be worried?
You just said it, confusion, interpretation. When you have that much gray area, the public hasn't been properly informed, they're not sure what's going on, and when you have that, it causes a lot of stress in the public, and then they put pressure back on us. They want to know, what are you guys going to do about this? So again, as somebody mentioned earlier, we need to scrap this and start over.
Okay.
So if you go and look at the 85-page guide that the state police put out, there's actually pictures and everything, and lists a lot of the handguns. They absolutely have no information in that guide on attachments, on what would be part of that. There is some wording in there, that some things that are not, and there's some things on the website, but it's not very clear on what is considered an attachment that could be used on one of these airsoft guns or something that would require to be registered.
Do you think most people in that case then just throw up their hands and say, I'm not going to worry about it? I can't, if I can't decipher it and nobody can tell me what?
Yeah, and
$1.5 million of them.
Yeah.
That and I mean, if they're already breaking the law, they're already going to break the law.
But they're not intentionally breaking the law, and that's where we as law enforcement officers, we have to prove that they had the intent to break the law, and that's a problem for us.
Okay.
And where I'm getting at with what I just stated, it's individuals who, the bill is so convoluted, the guide that ISP is so convoluted, we don't understand what's right, what's wrong, and there are a lot of legal, or people trying to follow the law, they don't even know if they're breaking it, to your point. And like you just said, I think one of the other aspects is people can order this stuff offline, off Amazon, everything of that nature. And on top of that, they have the 3D printers. You can print off your own receivers or anything of that nature. So, I mean, even if we were going to try to enforce this law, people can do it and break the law from their own home.
And we do want to mention that we did reach out to ISP for clarification, as well as to invite them on, and due to pending litigation, they declined, as well as we did ask Democratic lawmakers and
even sponsors of the bill.
Yes,
yeah.
And everyone was either prior engagements or declined. So we do want to mention that. Final thoughts, let's get to. What comes next? What do you think the future of this? We've heard, it's going to be scrapped. Yeah. But I guess let's start with the different departments. For sheriffs, what's moving forward? What do you think comes next?
Well, I think that we have to take a kind of a backseat approach until we get through all the legal battles, because if we, like I said, if we had enforced it and it was hinged upon something, now granted we can be selective, and those people that are already felons, we'll push it to the state's attorney and they can decide whether or not they want to prosecute it.
And our intent is to educate the public as to what the law says, and then use good discretion.
Okay.
Well, I think that our next step is to wait for the courts to sort this out. I mean, we've known from the very beginning that the federal courts are going to be the final arbiter, and the United States Supreme Court, no matter who wins or loses, at the Southern District or the Northern District, it goes to the appellate courts. Whoever loses at the appellate court is going to take it to the United States Supreme Court. It is going to get to the United States Supreme Court, and they will make the decision. We hope sooner rather than later. I mean, as you said, this has been going on for over a year now, and we'll know more in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, you were saying that there are some court cases coming up, some hearings.
All of the Illinois cases, and I think a Maryland case, have been consolidated for review. So the Supreme Court has agreed to look at all of these cases on May 14th, and then they'll decide, do they want to take them or not. Now, they don't take very many cases, I know from personal experience, but this may be a strong enough approach that we have all these states all across the country that have different laws and different court systems, and they're using very contorted reasoning to try to overcome the prior Supreme Court rulings and what our legal precedents are regarding the Second Amendment. So this may just be a chance for them to go, look, time out. We've already made 2 rulings. This is the law. Stop it. You cannot take people's Second Amendment rights away. You can't ban magazines over a certain capacity. You can't make a shotgun. It's how many shotguns are on that list?
Well, there's a flow chart, so I don't know how many in there. So it all falls into a flow chart on whether or not it's actually one that's banned.
Okay.
Yeah, and from a court perspective, State's Attorney, what's the future like for you?
You know, I have really good men and women police officers in Christian County, and as Sheriff Campbell said, they're going to send me reports and use their discretion on how to effectuate this current law, as we all have to, right? We have to follow the law. But I think what's more important is educating and informing individuals on how to be in compliance with the law. Now, until it changes, we got to, do our job every day. But I think we have some very intelligent officers in Christian County that will make sure things get done to the right specs. So.
But it's not door knocking and saying, do this.
Right. I don't think we're going to do door knocking, but until, I believe ISP would come down with a, if they form a new team or something like that, they need probable cause first to start knocking on doors.
Last thoughts?
Again, I'm very disappointed in the lawmakers. They keep passing these bills and they don't engage with law enforcement. They don't engage with the public the way they should. They sit down into the dome, and I think many of them think they're doing the right thing, but they're not.
Okay. All right. Well, State's Attorney, Sheriff's Representative, thank you so much for all four of you for taking the time to come to help explain, also give us your thoughts and a look into what's wrong, what's right, and the future.
I think it's very clear that either way, it's still controversial, right?
Yeah. We'll be right back.
You're watching a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall Special, Rights versus Rules, Gun Control in Illinois.
Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, we reached out to Illinois State Police and other Democrats to be part of our town hall, with all declining due to ongoing litigation or prior commitments.
Among those we reached out to was the main sponsor of the bill, Representative Bob Morgan, who cited prior commitments due to the ongoing legislative session at the time. But we caught up with Representative Morgan afterward to get his thoughts on some of the discussion.
More than a year after the Protect Illinois Communities Act was passed and signed into law, the bill's House sponsor, Representative Bob Morgan, says he still stands behind the law and maintains it is in line with the Constitution.
So this law is working, it's saving lives, and the constitutionality is being handled by the courts and resoundingly said, yes, in fact, this is constitutional, and we're going to continue to support Illinois in passing these common sense laws.
When speaking about Representative Dan Calkins' claims that Illinois Supreme Court was biased, Morgan says Calkins is simply not happy with how his cases have been going.
Yeah, I think sore losers who lose lawsuits are always looking for an excuse and never really looking at the fact that, in fact, they lost because the law was not on their side.
Morgan goes on to say federal appellate courts have ruled in the law's favor, and the U.S. Supreme Court has denied to rule on Illinois' law and similar challenges from other states.
The appellate court, U.S. appellate court, has already decided on multiple occasions now not to stop the Illinois assault weapon ban. And in fact, the U.S. Supreme Court has had a variety of requests, not just from my colleagues' requests to hear that state case, but also appeals from this appellate case and others around the country. And the U.S. Supreme Court has refused to stand in the way and step in and remove these assault weapon bans throughout the country.
Representative Morgan also responded to some of the issues brought up by sheriffs and state's attorneys, including how difficult these cases may be to prosecute. That's because they don't have easy access to the database of affidavits filed for assault weapons purchased before the law went into effect. However, both Representative Morgan and Illinois State Police confirm these affidavits are available to law enforcement through ISP's law enforcement agency's data system.
So local law enforcement, state law enforcement, they all have access to this list of individuals and weapons.
Representative Morgan says the goal with the registration was to avoid forcing people to give up weapons purchased legally, and he supports continued efforts to educate Illinois residents about the law and what weapons are covered by it.
Some states prohibit them from keeping their weapons at all. We didn't do that. We said that Illinois, if you had legally purchased your assault weapon and you wanted to keep it, we support that opportunity because you legally purchased that weapon.
Overall, Representative Morgan believes Illinois has become safer because of the Protect Illinois Communities Act.
Where I'm from in Highland Park, where there was a mass shooting from somebody who was under the age of 21 who had the legal opportunity to buy an assault weapon, legal opportunity to buy these high-capacity magazines, and then use those weapons, who had never committed a crime before, to go out and murder my community, people in my community, shot over 83 shots in a minute. Those types of things haven't happened in the last year, and as attrition happens and these assault weapons are removed from our community, we are no doubt safer,
and there'll be fewer gun deaths. And anybody standing in the way of that, I think, is probably arguing for different reasons, because I think everyone would agree we want fewer gun deaths in Illinois, and in fact, that's what we're seeing.
Representative Bob Morgan represents the Highland Park area, which saw a mass shooting at its annual 4th of July parade in 2022. This is the shooting he was referring to in his interview with us.
Yes, in that shooting, 7 people were killed, 48 others injured. The alleged shooter, Robert Cremo, is still waiting trial on more than 100 felony counts, including murder. Now, we also reached out to Governor J.B. Pritzker to respond to some of the comments made during our town hall.
And while our request for an interview was declined, his office did send us a statement saying, in part, quote, "The highest court in the country declined to block enforcement of the Protect Illinois Communities Act, and all Illinoisans are safer because the law remains in place. We must not become inured to mass shootings in our communities. All Americans deserve the right to worship, go to school, and celebrate without living in fear."
Pritzker goes on to say, quote, "I'm thankful once again for the members of the General Assembly who supported this law and the brave survivors who fought to make it a reality. I continue to urge Congress to act on national gun legislation so Illinois is not a lone island in a sea of states with weak gun laws." We'll be right back.
Watching a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall Special, Rights versus Rules, Gun Control in Illinois.
That's our time. Thanks so much for watching. We want to once again thank our guests for taking the time today.
And for our full coverage on assault weapon ban, you can head over to our website. Good night.
Don't miss a video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel today for more Central Illinois news.